Hey everyone, welcome back to the Radical Care for Christian Counselors podcast. My name is Bethany Boring, and if we haven't met before, well, glad to meet you. If you're listening to this podcast maybe for the first time and you're wondering, hey, am I in the right place? Well, I can assure you are. However, the Step Out and Thrive Radical Care for Christian Counselors podcast is mainly for those who are Christian counselors, mental health professionals, pastoral care leaders, but also those that really want to have deep community and deep connection with other people. You're not wanting just a surface level conversation, or maybe you're just tired of having endless one-on-one conversations. You would love to get a group together where you can talk about the real issues and support each other without fixing. If that's you, well, you're in the right place. We talk about so many topics on here, but really we want you to leave knowing that you are cared for, appreciated, resourced, and encouraged in everything that you do. So we're right in the middle of our Cognitive Distortion series. If you don't know what I'm talking about, well, I always talk about taking every thought captive, and we say the verse, but we really don't know like how to actually do that. And in the counseling world, we have many things called cognitive distortions, which talks about the way that we're thinking to really question it. Like, wait, is this really the way that I should be thinking right now? And a lot of times as counselors and mental health professionals and therapists, we're reframing, or even coaches, we're reframing for our clients to really bring out that negative thinking and whatever it is, that stinking thinking, as we like to call it, for our clients. But I do this with my kids. You guys, I've done this with myself. And that's also why I put the link down below to Rosebud, which I personally use, but you can try it out and see if it's a good source for you, because that is where I've pulled out some of my own cognitive distortions and patterns by putting some of my highlights from my journals in there, and then it finds out patterns that I've been doing, and that has helped me out tremendously. Or if you're just like old school and you just want to know what the cognitive distortions are, you can find the worksheet down there as well. So today, we are talking about one that makes me smile all the time is catastrophizing. And before you say I don't do that, let me just double check and reel it back. Because when I first started preparing for this episode, I immediately went to my kids. Immediately thought of my kids, and I have boys, so it's not just a girl thing. I think a lot of times when we think of catastrophizing, we just think of like, oh, my world's gonna end, right? The typical, at least I did, the typical middle school girl, right? Is it like, this is gonna be the worst thing ever? And as she falls to the ground, right? And just trying to make a big deal out of nothing, so to speak. That's not always true, especially if you had teenage girls. There's a lot of depth to a lot of the feelings and emotions that they're going through. However, there's a lot of times that my guys here at the house, they'll talk about things and they'll catastrophize as well. They're under so much pressure. It's really easy to feel completely overwhelmed and like the world is going to end. Like, I'm never going to make it past this homework, and I'm just going to have to take summer school, and it just continues, right? If you ever listen to somebody and they got the and the and, that's usually a sign that they're really not thinking through the reality of things, and they're just catastrophizing what's going on. The way I catch myself in this pattern is that when I feel completely overwhelmed, especially if I can't take a single step forward, I almost shut down. And although I don't really verbalize, I'm not a verbal processor as far as my catastrophe goes, because I've learned to be careful about the words that are coming out of my mouth. I can think that I can go there mentally in my mind, in my picture, right? A good example was before this last hurricane came, and it was on the other side of the state, mind you. It was far out of my thinking, honestly. I hadn't even thought about it. There was a lot of other things going on. I figured it was hitting the complete different side of the state. We didn't have to worry about anything. And then I started getting these texts from my kids who weren't with me at the time. They were going to come a little bit later, and they were texting about, Mom, did you see the cone? Did you see that we might be out of school? And then soon they were out of school. They called off school, and we started getting everybody runs to the shelves in Walmart and Winn-Dixie and Publix and all the places, and they take the bread and the milk and the water and just all the things. People down here go crazy. And then I start thinking, wow, like maybe I'm not taking this serious. well, I should actually go and actually start getting some stuff together. So I asked my boys, I'm like, hey, I have some clients that I have to be with, and I have some groups that I have to facilitate, and I would like to get this in, especially if we lose electric. So can you go to the stores and can you get these items that we need? Okay, if you live in Florida, you know, going out to the stores before a hurricane is like insane. Everybody and their brother are out there. Plus, they're not thinking straight. And you got first-time Floridians that this is their first hurricane, and they are just like packing for the apocalypse. And now, granted, I don't want people out there to hear this that if you have been affected by a natural disaster, I don't want to minimize this because that's another thing. That's another cognitive distortion. You can minimize things that are actually bigger. However, this happens every single time a hurricane comes kind of close to Florida. People just go crazy and they get enough food for like weeks. Like if you go through the shelves, if you guys know the Chef Boyardee stuff, gone. I'm talking even the nasty stuff that nobody wants, gone. Because they know they can have a can opener and you can eat it when it's cold. Anything like that, people take and it's gone. And so I have my kids and I warned them ahead of time because they had never been to the store with me before a hurricane. So this is their first time. My 16-year-old's driving. I'm praying that he makes it there. I asked him to text along the journey. And so they eventually make it back after visiting 4 different stores just to get 4 or 5 jugs of water, some batteries, and I think I asked them to get some snacks. That was it. They had to go to 5 different stores to get all of these things. And even then, they came back with some lemonade in a jug. They're saying, well, we can always drink the lemonade, Mom, and then we can fill it up with water. I was like, okay, well played. Well played. In fact, he got one thing of sweet tea and one thing of lemonade so we can mix it. So it's like, okay, at that point, you just go with it. But we talked a little bit later that night about what they had experienced. And all of a sudden, my kids went from, wow, we're going to be out of school to, Mom, what happened if something actually happens? What happens if our house gets destroyed? And what happens to the dog and the cat? And do we have an evacuation plan? And do we know where we would run to? And does the car have enough gas? I mean, all the things we started talking about that night. And it was the first time really my kids have ever really thought about these things outside of the whole, hey, we're going to have a hurricane day. And do we have hurricane snacks? So it was really interesting for me to sit down with them. And they were very much, especially one was catastrophizing, just everything way out of control. And a good tactic that I've used is one, I'm going to validate it. When we're catastrophizing things, can we just take a minute and validate? Like you saw me just a minute ago when I said, hey, if that's you and you've been in a natural disaster, I want to just meet you there. And that's hard. Okay. I didn't minimize it. I made sure that I was with them in that emotion. So my boys, I'm like, guys, yeah, this is serious. We have, at that time, it was a Category 5 hurricane headed towards the coast. They were expecting it to go down. And even by the time it reached us, they were expecting like a tropical storm, which is nothing for our area. But, I wanted to say they saw a Category 5 and their mind is thinking of a Category 5 actually hitting our house, which the house would be gone probably. And so that's what they were in their mind thinking. And so I met them in that space. I'm like, yeah, like if a Category 5 hit our house, that would just be devastating. How would that make you feel? And we had this conversation. And then I said, okay, so let's go down that rabbit hole. And that's usually depending on the person that you're dealing with, okay? You have to know the person that you're processing this with. And I would like to say, because I've heard this done 2 different ways, this example that I'm going to do with you. If you have someone that is going against something that's really, really challenging and really, really difficult, make sure they do this with somebody else that they trust. Just because it's really easy to get stuck and you don't want to get stuck in this exercise. So it's always healthy, regardless, actually, to do this with somebody else with you. I've heard people say, take this personally and you can just do it in your journal. I don't like that unless it's just unless they're trying to minimize it. And then that might be healthy to actually help them get the big picture. But in this case, we're catastrophizing something. So we think this is the end of the world, okay? And we need to actually break this down and actually see it all the way through. A lot of times we'll remember a song, right? And we'll keep on going through our heads until what? We listen to it all the way through. An example that I do with people that have nightmares and they come to me with nightmares, what we do is we see it all the way through to the end. Sometimes we even give permission for God to come in and change the ending, but we make an ending to it. And it's amazing how many times the nightmare doesn't repeat itself because it ends. Until it ends, it keeps on going on and on and on and on and on through our mind, right? So what we can do is we can actually walk someone through, and then what? And then what? And then what? And pretty soon you either realize, A, it's just silly because of everything you're talking about. You're just like, I can't even. And B, well, you reached an end point. Like, okay, all right, we made it. And even when you reach that, it's like, well, that's probably not going to happen. Or maybe it could happen. But at least you say it, and then it helps you just calm down. So in this example, we said, okay, so we're going to say it stays a Hurricane 5, which in my mind, it was hard for me because I'm like, I know it's not. You can't go across that much land and still stay in a strong hurricane. You just can't do it. And so we talked a little bit about that too. So that really softened a lot of this. But I'm like, okay, if the hurricane hits us, and then what? Well, the kids told me, well, we're going to have the boards up, so we'll be protected in the house. And then what? Well, I guess if it did get through the boards, then it still might not crack the window. Good. And then what? Well, if water does get into the house, we know how to make sure we can keep the water out if we need to, or we have a place that we can evacuate. We got friends and neighbors that we can go to. Okay. And then what? Well, we could always take the cat and the dog with us if we absolutely had to, which we did have to take the dog, not because of water damage, just because we didn't have any electric and long time with boys, not electric in the house and not running toilets. It's just not good. But anyway, but all this to say, we kept on going through, and then what, and then what, and then what. And it really got to a point where, I mean, my guys and I were laughing there at the end, which was a healthy place, but we did end and we started realizing all this stuff that we have, it's just stuff. It really is. It's just stuff. And what's really important to us is that we are all together. And the animals, we realized the animals were really important to us out of that. I already knew that, but they realized that too. But that exercise really helped them go through the emotions and get everything out on the table. Another exercise I do with clients, especially if they're walking through something really, really hard, is okay, when they get to the ending, I say, hey, can we just invite Jesus into this? What part of that is Jesus in? Or can we just invite Jesus into this moment right now? They reach the end. And let's say you're at the end. Where's Jesus in that moment? Where's he with you right now? What's he saying to you? Is he touching your shoulder? He's sitting down and resting. There's so many curious questions we can bring out there. So I hope this helps you. Again, there's so many different ways that you can handle catastrophizing, but that's a technique that I've used many times, not only in my own catastrophizing moments, which I do have, but also especially with my boys and with others that have really walked through just some really challenging times. I hope that's helpful to you. Let me know, have you gone through catastrophe and what would that look like in your everyday? One thing I've been mentioning to people, and I mentioned the rosebud thing, which is down there, and the cognitive distortions, which is down below too, in the notes, or YouTube, or wherever it is that you watch or hear this podcast, it's in the notes, so to go check it out. But I mention this because a lot of people do journal, and it really is healthy, even if you only write a sentence or two or three a day, because you can go back and find cognitive distortions. You can go back and find goals that you've reached. You can go out and find God's presence in amazing ways. So if you're not journaling, maybe I'll do a whole series about that. I don't know. But even if you audio journal, like through speech, that's what I'm doing right now because it's a lot easier to do that than me trying to write. There's ways of doing it, and it really is important, and it really does help your mental health plus your relationship with God. So hope that helps. Would love to hear from you. Let me know which cognitive distortion you got the most out of, and let me know how this exercise went. Did you actually follow it all the way to the end? Have you practiced it with somebody? I would love to hear some more from you. And remember, dare to do more than just survive. Step out and thrive. Have an amazing week, you all, and see you guys back here next week. Bye.